Welcome into today's show. I wanted to talk about just a singular topic on today's show because not only do I find it interesting, I think it's important. Um, February 28th, 2024, when I am recording this, and we're just under 9, maybe 10 months before the entirety of our country here in America, obviously, will most likely change. And as we've gotten farther and farther past 2020, just 4 years ago, things have changed so much, not just in the world, but here in America, especially. And I think it's important to talk about some politics on this podcast, although I try not to give any real indication of where I align politically, because as a 25-year-old, I don't know how much I am qualified to speak about because I am not a historical expert by any means or any kind of political analyst by any means, because frankly, I don't know any of the laws that are really being passed. Like, I can't read a bill and understand it per se, but I do my best to try and display what other people are saying in a what I believe is a balanced way. And I think that's the best I can do. I can certainly do better. I can read more. I can use ChatGPT, for example, to help me out with some of my understanding of these pieces that are being written. So there is a way for me to improve. However, I will today present an interesting piece or an interesting, I guess, announcement that was made and kind of the fallout of this announcement. And then later on, kind of talk about where our country is at and why I think it's important to not only take 2024, the end of 2024, seriously. Obviously, it's an election year, and I'm talking, like I said, 9, 10 months out from the actual election dates. But I think that as we move forward, not only as a country, the United States, but as a planet, I think it's very important for us to kind of realize and recognize where we're headed. I'm not saying who to vote for. Frankly, I don't think I'm going to vote for either candidate or any candidate. It does not matter which candidate is placed on that ballot. I probably won't vote in 2024. The reason for that is most likely because um I just don't want to go out and register to vote, do all that kind of stuff, and because none of these candidates that I'm seeing are persuading me enough. And maybe someday in the future, I will talk about specific differences that I hold with certain candidates. But that is not what I'm going to do today. Today is maybe not going to be too much of a exciting and really energetic episode. It's going to be me reading a lot. But once again, I think it's important because the articles and the covers that has come out about this is basically a summarization of this piece that I'm going to read. Now, this piece that I'm going to read, which I will introduce in a second, is 375 pages long. I will not be reading that much. I will, however, be reading about 15, 20 pages of it. So I think this is an important thing to discuss, and I think you'll hopefully find it somewhat interesting. And before we get into it, a little background on this. This was released a few weeks ago and then recently got picked up maybe about 2 weeks ago, really started to explode in popularity about certain phrases that were in here. But first, let's read this piece. From the U.S. Department of Justice, the Special Counsel's Office, dated February 5th, 2024. the Attorney General of the United States. Report of the Special Counsel on the investigation into unauthorized removal, retention, and disclosure of classified documents discovered at locations including the Penn Biden Center and the Delaware private residence of President Joseph R. Biden Jr. I've talked about previously on this podcast about documents found both by Trump and Biden as well. And I also talked about in that episode, if I remember, I think I also talked about the military spending under Donald Trump and overall government spending of Trump, which was a policy with him that I disagreed with. So I guess there's one point there of political talk that I've done on the podcast. I haven't done much since. But let's continue on. Dear Attorney General Garland, enclosed, please find a confidential report explaining the prosecution or declination decisions I have reached as required by whatever this says. As we previously discussed at the request of the White House counsel and personal counsel to President Biden, I agreed with certain conditions, including non-disclosure to allow counsel to review a draft of the report for purposes of determining whether to assert any claim of privilege and otherwise providing comments to the special counsel's office. Counsel reviewed a draft of the report on February 3rd and 4th, 2024. Earlier today, counsel submitted to my office the enclosed letter. After reviewing their letter, my team and I corrected their following minor errors, and this is just mostly clerical stuff. All right, this is from Special Counsel Robert Err. Thank you for allowing the Special Counsel's Office to conduct our investigation independently and for supporting us with necessary resources. I'm extraordinarily grateful for the thorough, careful, and diligent work of the Department of Justice employees who worked on this matter. I'm deeply honored to have served with them. From Robert K. Herr, Special Counsel. Let's get into this. Report on the investigation into unauthorized removal, retention, and disclosure of classified documents discovered at locations including the Penn Biden Center and the Delaware private residence of President Joseph R. Biden Jr. Here are the table of contents right here. So what I am going to read for you is the summary. Now, there is a lot of different things in here as well. And as always, I will put this into the description. But frankly, I am not going to spend multiple hours reading through the 300 plus pages that are in this report. However, I think by reading the executive summary, you get an idea of what this is about in words that I probably won't understand, but I think it's important to have this out there because I don't know how many people actually talk through this and go through this piece. Executive summary. We conclude that no criminal charges are warranted in this matter. We would reach the same conclusion even if Department of Justice policy did not foreclose criminal charges against a sitting president. Our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. These materials included marked classified documents about military and foreign policy in Afghanistan and notebooks containing Mr. Biden's handwritten entries about issues of national security and foreign policy implicating sensitive intelligence sources and methods. FBI agents recovered these materials from the garages, offices, and basement den in Mr. Biden's Wilmington, Delaware home. However, for the reasons summarized below, we conclude that the evidence does not establish Mr. Biden's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Prosecution of Mr. Biden is also unwarranted based on our consideration of the aggravating and mitigating factors set forth in the Department of Justice Principles of Federal Prosecution. For these reasons, we decline prosecution of Mr. Biden. So they are not going to prosecute the president for these documents. Let's continue on. The classified documents and other materials recovered in this case span Mr. Biden's career in a national public life. During that career, Mr. Biden has long seen himself as a historic figure. Elected to the Senate at age 29, he considered running for president as early as 1980 and did so in 1988, 2008, and 2020. He believed his record during decades in the Senate made him worthy of the presidency, and he collected papers and artifacts related to significant issues and events in his career. He used these materials to write memoirs published in 2007 and 2017 to document his legacy and to cite as evidence that he was a man of presidential timber. In 2009, then Vice President Biden strongly opposed the military's plan to send more troops to Afghanistan. U.S. policy in Afghanistan was deeply important to Mr. Biden, and he labored to dissuade President Obama from escalating America's involvement there and repeating what Mr. Biden believed was a mistake akin to Vietnam. Despite Mr. Biden's advice, President Obama ordered a surge of additional U.S. troops, and Mr. Biden's views endured sharp criticisms from others within and outside the administration. But he always believed history would prove him right. He retained materials documenting his opposition to the troop surge, including a classified handwritten memo he sent President Obama over the 2009 Thanksgiving holiday and related marked classified documents. FBI agents recovered these materials from Mr. Biden's Delaware garage and home office in December 2022 and January 2023. So this is talking about one of these pieces that was found. It was basically, like we just read, a letter, which I think would surprise some, but maybe not all. Him being against the war in Afghanistan, probably a good position to have, but also one that, as you saw when he became president, we were actually able to pull out of Afghanistan. Now, it was not a perfect removal, and I'm certainly no expert on that, but there are many different other people that you could talk to and listen to who I think would have a much better analysis on that situation than myself. But I could be wrong. Maybe he handled it as best as he could, but maybe he did not. Anyways, so it appears that he's not, and I'm going to do my best not to equate this with the Trump case at all. I'm going to try and not mention Trump at all, because this is not about a Biden-Trump thing. I have to read this out and then allow me to make my point. So you just got to stay with me, stay in the pocket. With Biden being against the war in Afghanistan and then becoming president, he probably would have kept some of these documents about notes that he wrote to Obama. And I mean, I would imagine he probably had some strategic ideas that he wrote down into his notepad, which is kind of what I feel like they're referencing here. But let's continue on. Also, during his 8 years as vice president, Mr. Biden regularly wrote notes by hand in notebooks. Some of these notes related to classified subjects, including the president's daily brief and National Security Council meetings, and some of the notes are themselves classified. After the vice presidency, Mr. Biden kept these classified notebooks in unsecured and unauthorized spaces at his Virginia and Delaware homes, and used some of the notebooks as reference material for his second memoir, Promise Me Dad, which was published in 2017. And then this next sentence is important. To our knowledge, no one has identified any classified information and published in Promise Me Dad, but Mr. Biden shared information, including some classified information from those notebooks with his ghostwriter. Uh-oh. FBI agents recovered the notebooks from the office and basement den in Mr. Biden's Delaware home in January 2023. Now we get into the marked classified documents about Afghanistan. These documents from fall 2009 have classifications and markings up to the top secret, sensitive, compartmented information level. They were found in a box with Mr. Biden's Delaware garage that contained other materials of great personal significance to him and that he appears to have personally used and accessed. The marked classified documents were found along with the drafts of the handwritten 2009 Thanksgiving memo Mr. Biden sent President Obama in a last-ditch effort to persuade him not to send additional troops to Afghanistan. These materials were proof of the stand Mr. Biden took in what he regarded as among the most important decisions of his vice presidency. Mr. Biden wrote in his 2007 and 2017 memoirs with the help of a ghostwriter. In a recorded conversation with his ghostwriter in February 2017, about a month after he left office, Mr. Biden said, while referencing his 2009 Thanksgiving memo, this is that memo that he sent to Obama, that he had just found all the classified stuff downstairs. At the time, he was renting a home in Virginia where he met his ghostwriter to work on his second memoir. Downstairs from where they met was Mr. Biden's office where he stored his papers. He moved out of the Virginia home in 2019, consolidating his belongings in Delaware, where FBI agents later found marked classified documents about the Afghanistan troop surge in his garage. Evidence supports the inference that when Mr. Biden said in 2017 that he had just found all the classified stuff downstairs in Virginia, he was referring to the same marked classified documents about Afghanistan that FBI agents found in 2022 in his Delaware garage. Nevertheless, we do not believe this evidence is sufficient, as jurors would likely find reasonable doubt for one or more several reasons. Both when he served as vice president and when the Afghanistan documents were found in Mr. Biden's Delaware garage in 2022, his possession of them in his Delaware home was not a basis for prosecution because, as vice president and president, he had authority to keep classified documents in his home. The best case for charges would rely on Mr. Biden's possession of the Afghanistan documents in his Virginia home in February 2017, when he was a private citizen and when he told his ghostwriter he had just found classified material. So the timing is what matters. Several defenses are likely to create reasonable doubt as to such charges. For example, Mr. Biden could have found the classified Afghanistan documents at his Virginia home in 2017 and then forgotten about them soon after. This could convince some reasonable jurors that he did not retain them willfully. When Mr. Biden told his ghostwriter about finding all the classified stuff downstairs, his tone was matter of fact. For a person who had viewed classified documents nearly every day for 8 years as vice president, including regularly in his home, finding classified documents at home less than a month after leaving office could have been an unremarkable and forgettable event. Notably, the classified Afghanistan documents did not come up again in Mr. Biden's dozens of hours of recorded conversations with the ghostwriter or in his book. And the place where the Afghanistan documents were eventually found in Mr. Biden's Delaware garage in a badly damaged box surrounded by household detritus, or garbage basically, suggests the documents might have been forgotten. In addition, Mr. Biden's memory was significantly limited, both during his recorded interviews with a ghostwriter in 2017 and in his interview with our office in 2023. Interesting. And this is a part here where some people have caught on to this, have reported on this fact. And part of the reason why this special counsel is so important is because there are certain things in here that have made people go, interesting. And that was one of them. In addition, Mr. Biden's memory was significantly limited, both during his recorded interviews with a ghostwriter in 2017 and in his interview with our office in 2023. Let's continue. And his cooperation with our investigation, including by reporting to the government that the Afghanistan documents were in his Delaware garage, will likely convince some jurors that he made an innocent mistake rather than acting willfully. That is, with intent to break the law as the statute requires. He was not trying to break the law. Another viable defense is that Mr. Biden might not have retained the classified Afghanistan documents in his Virginia home at all. They could have been stored by mistake without his knowledge at his Delaware home since the time he was vice president, as were other classified documents recovered during our investigation. This would rebut charges that he willfully retained the documents in Virginia. Given Mr. Biden's limited precision and recall during his interviews with his ghostwriter and with our office, jurors may hesitate to place too much evidentiary weight on a single 8-word utterance to his ghostwriter about finding classified documents in Virginia in the absence of other, more direct evidence. We searched for such additional evidence and found it wanting. In particular, no witness, photo, email, text message, or any other evidence conclusively places the Afghanistan documents at the Virginia home in 2017. In addition to the shortage of evidence, there are other innocent explanations for the documents that we cannot refute. When Mr. Biden told his ghostwriter he just found all the classified stuff downstairs, he could have been referring to something other than the Afghanistan documents, and our report discusses these possibilities in detail. We have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. Based on our direct interactions with and observation of him, he is someone for whom many jurors will want to identify reasonable doubt. It would be difficult to convince a jury that they should convict him, by then a former president well into his 80s, of a serious felony that requires a mental state of willfulness. We conclude the evidence is not sufficient to convict, and we decline to recommend prosecution of Mr. Biden for his retention of the classified Afghanistan documents. That's it right there. Part of the reason why this story blew up and why this story was so crazy for many people to think about and to kind of discover that this had come out is because of this sentence right there. A sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. That's what a lot of people online caught on to at first glance, because they're saying, wait a second. The president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, the man who was democratically elected by tens of millions of people to lead the most powerful country in the world. That guy, a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory, he's running that? That's interesting. And he's running for re-election. Interesting. All right. And a lot of people at first were like, that's interesting. No, I don't say a lot. I'm not talking millions, but there were some people, myself included, saying, wait a second. That's interesting that you put that in there. That when talking about these Afghanistan documents and having this classified material in your home, which frankly, I'm having classified material in your home is not the craziest thing or the biggest juiciest story ever. I do think that it is interesting that it was reported that he was so negative about the Afghanistan war and talking to President Obama about, hey, we got to stop this. And the war continued. I think that's an interesting point. But I think for this report to come out and say basically that the president of the United States is an old, weary, weak man is not a good look. It's concerning. It's concerning for not just our political spectrums and our political expertise in our political systems and our politicians and Congress. This is cause for concern for, I would say, more than just America. I think this is something of concern for our entire planet. And I think that this road that we are headed down and these people that we have put in charge often are not going to lead us down a path of the best possible ending. And when I say that, I am talking about expanding beyond what our current form is, expanding to Mars and building a colony on Mars, and then expanding, say, outwards to Saturn and Jupiter, and then say expanding out to a different star system and spreading our best part of our ideas out into the cosmos, out throughout our own galaxy, spreading the best of what it means to be a human to the entire universe, bringing the best of us to the stars. With leadership like we currently have in so many places on the face of the earth, there's so much corruption, there's so much war, there's so much killing, there's so much greed, lying, deceit with our leaders. And it's not just America, but around the world. And it is so important to have a multitude of leaders who are looking to do good for our planet. And I'm not talking about climate change or anything like that. I'm saying no war, helping out your own communities, doing your best to allow people the freedoms to go about their day for the most part, trying to reduce crime, trying to bring great health care to your people, trying to make great things, to have an abundant job economy, to have your citizens not live paycheck to paycheck if possible, to be able to have a class of people who are able to rise up and become very powerful people, to become wealthy in their own rights. As it looks right now, we're not very close to that reality where we could have here in America that chance, because our current leadership is a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. Because it's not about exactly what is happening right now. I'm talking about what is going to happen to us 50, 100, 500, 1,000 years from now, when we're starting to really dwindle on the resources here on Earth. Maybe by then we'll have some kind of mining technology that we can put on asteroids. Because at some point we're going to run out of resources here on this planet. And we're going to have to find whatever resource, water, anything you can think of on this planet that we take out of the ground, whether that's oil or natural gas and different types of rocks and metals. That kind of stuff is going to run out at some point. And we're going to have to get it from somewhere else, unless we're going to want to radically change our society. In order to do that, we need to have a common goal as a planet to want to go on these ventures. I don't know if there's going to be a single company that would be able to go out into the star systems and harvest resources on a very, very large scale and then distribute that to the entire globe. Because if it's only distributed to just a country or to a part of a country, there could be some real issues. That's what I'm thinking about. And with leadership like this, the goals are just not what the priorities should be, in my mind. I'm no expert, but I have a vision for this planet because, as we know, as far as we know, this is the only place left. There is no other place in the universe except us with life on it, especially life to this point. And it is so important that we spread the best of our society: music, comedy, laughter, movies. Spread these ideas that make us humans so great across the universe. And I think we have a responsibility to do that as, in our local group, the only form of life. Maybe there's one Earth per galaxy, and it's upon those societies to propagate throughout the galaxy and to create a society of good stand-up people, not a people like in the future Star Wars where you have these giant empires that are fighting and killing each other still, although I think that probably will still happen. But the goal is to have a society of love, peace, and respect. But as it stands right now, it doesn't appear like that is going to happen. Let's continue on. Notebooks containing classified information. FBI agents recovered from unlocked drawers in the office and basement den of Mr. Biden's Delaware home a set of notebooks he used as vice president. Evidence shows that he knew the notebooks contained classified information. Mr. Biden wrote down obviously sensitive information discussed during intelligence briefings with President Obama and meetings in the White House Situation Room about matters of national security and military and foreign policy. And while reading his notebook entries aloud during meetings with his ghostwriter, Mr. Biden sometimes skipped over presumptively classified materials and warns his ghostwriter that entries might be classified. But at least 3 times, Mr. Biden read from classified entries aloud to his ghostwriter nearly verbatim. Some evidence also suggests Mr. Biden knew he could not keep classified handwritten notes at home after leaving office. Mr. Biden, who had decades of experience with classified information, was deeply familiar with the measures taken to safeguard classified information and the need for those measures to prevent harm to national security. Asked about reports that former President Trump had kept classified documents at his own home, Mr. Biden wondered how anyone could be that irresponsible and voiced concern about what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods. While vice president, he kept his notebooks in a White House safe for a time, in contrast with his decision after leaving office to keep them at home in unlocked drawers. When Mr. Biden left office, he also knew his staff decided to store note cards containing his classified notes in a secure, compartmented information facility at the National Archives, and he knew his notebooks contained the same type of classified information. As he told his ghostwriter during a recorded interview, the same staff who arranged to secure his classified note cards didn't even know he had retained possession of his classified notebooks. Twice in 2017, Mr. Biden visited the National Archives SCIF to review his classified note cards while writing his book. Yet he kept his notebooks, which had also contained classified information, in unlocked drawers at home. He had strong motivations to do so and to ignore the rules for properly handling the classified information in his notebooks. He consulted the notebooks liberally during hours of discussions with his ghostwriter, and viewed them as highly private and valued possessions with which he was unwilling to part. We do not, however, believe this evidence would meet the government's burden at trial, particularly the requirement to prove that Mr. Biden intended to do something the law forbids. Consistent with statements Mr. Biden made during our interview of him and arguments made by the White House counsel, Mr. Biden's personal counsel, we expect Mr. Biden's defense at trial would be that he thought his notebooks were his personal property and he was allowed to take them home even if they contained classified information. During our interview of him, Mr. Biden was emphatic, declaring that his notebooks were notebooks are, quote, my property, and that, quote, every president before me has done the exact same thing. That is, kept handwritten classified materials after leaving office. He also cited the diaries that President Reagan kept in his private home after leaving office, noting that they included classified information. Contemporaneous evidence suggests that when Mr. Biden left office in 2017, he believed he was allowed to keep the notebooks in his home. In a recorded conversation with his ghostwriter in April 2017, Mr. Biden explained that despite his staff's views to the contrary, he did not think he was required to turn in his note cards to the National Archives, where they would be stored in a SCIF, and he had not wanted to do so. At trial, he would argue plausibly that he thought the same about his notebooks. If this is what Mr. Biden thought, we believe he was mistaken about what the law permits, but this view finds some support in historical practice. The clearest example is President Reagan, who left the White House in 1989 after 8 years' worth of handwritten diaries, which he appears to have kept at his California home, even though they contained top secret information. During criminal litigation involving a former Reagan administration official in 1989 and 1990, the Department of Justice stated in public court filings that the, quote, currently classified diaries were Mr. Reagan's, quote, personal records. Yet we know of no steps the department or other agencies took to investigate Mr. Reagan for mishandling classified information or to retrieve or secure his diaries. Most jurors would likely find evidence of this precedent and Mr. Biden's claimed reliance on it, which we expect would be admitted at trial to be compelled evidence that Mr. Biden did not act willfully. So there is precedent. As with marked classified documents, because the evidence is not sufficient to convict Mr. Biden for willfully retaining the notebooks, we decline prosecution. We also consider whether Mr. Biden willfully disclosed national defense information to his ghostwriter by reading aloud certain classified notebook passages to the ghostwriter nearly verbatim on at least 3 occasions. Mr. Biden should have known that by reading his unfiltered notes about classified meetings in the Situation Room, he was sharing classified information with his ghostwriter. But the evidence does not show that when Mr. Biden shared the specific passages with his ghostwriter, Mr. Biden knew the passages were classified and intended to share classified information. Mr. Biden's lapses in attention and vigilance demonstrate why former officials should not keep classified materials unsecured at home and read them aloud to others. But jurors could well conclude that Mr. Biden's actions were unintentional. We therefore decline to charge Mr. Biden for disclosure of these passages to his ghostwriter. So where we currently are right now in this, I don't find this case as a total to be something that is completely crazy and something that is not per se an issue, right? I don't have an issue with the conclusions that they're coming to. I get that it's classified information and you can't have it at home and all that kind of stuff. It's not that big of a deal to me. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I know classified information is very important, but I just think there are things that are far more important. But I understand that in many aspects, this is still something that's incredibly important. But just to me, as a story, keeping classified documents in your home is certainly not something that I would impeach somebody over. Unless there were other things that they were doing, like if they were a war criminal, like flat out war criminal, like some of our previous presidents, then I would probably use this as cover and say, yeah, they're totally, this is got to be, they have classified documents at home. This is an impeachable offense. You must follow, as the president of the United States, you must know what the rules and regulations are for your position. It's part of the job. You got to keep your classified documents in the proper places. And if not, then you're not fit to be president. But I would only use that argument if I'm trying to get them out of office for a different reason, right? I don't think that this analysis so far is so crazy and so, whoa, they're coming to these crazy conclusions. I just think that I would mostly agree with these statements. And when put into the context of how they're talking about it, a man who is old and weak and not able to really be so strong of a leader that he seems, what I'll say, it's not said in here, but competent, I think is one conclusion that you could potentially make. Potentially, I'm not saying that is what Biden is. I don't know if competent is a respectful term for the president, but I think by reading this report and this person's perspective, it's something to consider. Moving on. Principles of federal prosecution. We have also evaluated, quote, all relevant considerations in aggravation and mitigation, as outlined in the Justice Manual, and determined that on balance, these factors do not support prosecution of Mr. Biden. Historically, after leaving office, many former presidents and vice presidents have knowingly taken home sensitive materials related to national security from their administrations without being charged with crimes. Boom. So why is Biden any different? Okay. This historical record is important context for judging whether and why to charge a former vice president and former president, as Mr. Biden would be when susceptible to prosecution for similar actions taken by several of his predecessors. With one exception, there is no record of the Department of Justice prosecuting a former president or vice president for mishandling classified documents from his own administration. The exception is former President Trump. It is not our role to assess the criminal charges pending against Mr. Trump, but several material distinctions between Mr. Trump's case and Mr. Biden's case are clear. Unlike the evidence involving Mr. Biden, the allegations set forth in the indictment of Mr. Trump, if proven, would present serious aggravating facts. Most notably, after being given multiple chances to return classified documents and avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, but he also obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and then lie about it. In contrast, Mr. Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and the Department of Justice, consented to the search of multiple locations, including his homes, sat for a voluntary interview, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation. In reaching our decision, we did not consider every circumstance in which criminal charges against a former president or a vice president for mishandling classified information may be warranted. But on the facts of this case, the fundamental interests of society do not require criminal charges against Mr. Biden. For this additional reason, applying the principles of federal prosecution set forth in the Justice Manual, we decline prosecution. The practices of retaining classified material in unsecured locations and reading classified material to one's ghostwriter present serious risks to national security. Given the vulnerability of extraordinarily sensitive information to loss or compromise to America's adversaries, the department routinely highlights such risk when pursuing classified mishandling prosecutions, but addressing those risks through criminal charges, the only means available to this office, it is not the proper remedy here. Interesting. Moving on. Other classified materials. For other recovered classified documents, after a thorough investigation, the decision to decline criminal charges was straightforward. The FBI recovered additional marked classified documents at the Penn Biden Center, somewhere in Mr. Biden's Delaware home, and in collection of his Senate papers at the University of Delaware. But the evidence suggests that Mr. Biden did not willfully retain these documents and that they could plausibly have been brought to these locations by mistake. We also investigated whether persons other than Mr. Biden knowingly mishandled these classified documents, and our investigation showed that they did not. In reaching these conclusions, we note the numerous previous instances in which marked classified documents have been discovered, intermixed with the personal papers of former executive branch officials and members of Congress. Mr. Biden's ghostwriter and destruction of evidence. After learning of the special counsel's appointment in this matter, Mr. Biden's ghostwriter deleted audio recordings he had created of his discussions with Mr. Biden during the writing of Mr. Biden's 27 memoir. The recordings had significant evidentiary value. After telling the special counsel's office what he had done, the ghostwriter turned over his computer and external hard drive and consented to their search. Based on the FBI's analysis, it appears the FBI recovered all deleted audio files relating to the memoir, though portions of a few of the files appear to be missing, which is possible when forensic tools are used to recover deleted files. The ghostwriter kept and did not delete or attempt to delete his near verbatim transcripts of the recordings and produced those transcripts to us, including for each of the incomplete recovered files. We considered whether to charge the ghostwriter with obstruction of justice, but we believe the evidence would be insufficient to obtain a conviction and therefore declined to prosecute him. Dodged a bullet there. Jeez. While the ghostwriter admitted that he deleted the recordings after he learned of the special counsel's investigation, the evidence falls short of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that he intended to impede an investigation, which is the intent required by law. In his interviews, the ghostwriter offered plausible, innocent reasons for why he deleted the recordings. He also preserved his transcripts that contained some of the most incriminating information against Mr. Biden, including his statement about finding all the classified stuff downstairs in 2017, which is inconsistent with an intent to impede an investigation by destroying evidence. And the ghostwriter voluntarily produced to investigators his notes and the devices from which the recordings were recovered. For these reasons, we believe that the admissible evidence would not suffice to obtain a conviction of the ghostwriter for obstruction of justice. On balance, relevant aggravating and mitigating factors also do not support his prosecution. And here we get into the rest of it. I mean, I want to the last thing that I think we need to highlight here, obviously, when presented with this evidence and the other examples brought up of past presidents bringing these documents home, I agree. I really don't care about this. But something I am interested in are the mentions of Joe Biden and his mental ability. One example here. Mr. Biden's memory was significantly limited, both during his recorded interviews with the ghostwriter in 2017 and his interview with our office in 2023. I mean, given Mr. Biden's limited precision and recall during his interviews with his ghostwriter with our office, jurors may hesitate to place too much evidentiary weight on a single 8-worded utterance to his ghostwriter. And here it is right here. We have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. The President of the United States would present himself to a jury as that. What does he present himself to the American people as? To Congress, to the House of Representatives, to the Senate, Department of Justice. Is he presenting himself to them as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory? I don't think so. But here it is right here. We conclude the evidence is not sufficient to convict, and we decline to recommend prosecution of Mr. Biden. That's major takeaway. Here is the Associated Press with their breakdown of the entire thing. I will not read this. I will just put this into the description, but yeah. Special counsel's report takes what seems at times gratuitous aim at Biden's memory and mental capabilities as it lays out the ways in which the president could mount a hypothetical defense had he been charged with a crime. Yep, there we go. There's our quote right there. Why so harsh? The Justice Department is in a precarious position investigating Biden, his son Hunter, and also Donald Trump on separate accusations. All during the 2024 presidential campaign, Trump has repeatedly claimed that federal investigators are out to send him to jail for political revenge. And Attorney General Merrick Garland has taken great pains to insulate the department from Trump's attacks and demonstrate prosecutorial independence. As such, he selected her, a Republican former U.S. attorney appointed by Trump, to oversee the investigation into whether Biden mishandled classified documents. The appointee came amid special counsel Jack Smith's investigation of Trump's handling of classified documents and the former president's role in the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. The dings at Biden's memories were blasted as cheap, false shots by Biden attorney and White House lawyers who said the report uses prejudicial words to describe a commonplace occurrence among witnesses, a lack of recall of years-old events. 2017, 2009, 2007? Years old? I don't know. Maybe. Anyways, I will put this down in the description. I will also put this down in the description as well. Interesting read right here. Anyways, let's talk a little bit more about Joe Biden. 538, originally a place that I used in high school for basketball. And sports odds for the Super Bowl, for playoff teams and that kind of stuff. Now, I'm using it to look at a poll of the popularity of Joe Biden. All the way back January 23rd of 2021. A little over 3 years ago. There was a 53.1% approve and a 30.2% disapprove of people who were polled. That is plus 23, right? Plus 20, yeah, plus 23 approval right here. And now you can see February 27th, there's a 55.4% disapprove and a 39.4% approve of Joe Biden. It has been a wild road, and you can kind of see right where it happens right here. Approve 47.2%, disapprove 46.7%, August 31st of 2021. And then September 3rd, disapprove finally takes over at 47.4% and approve at 46.3%. And then from there, it has not looked back. The worst I think it's been is right here, 56.1% disapprove and 38.3% approve right here. That might be his lowest. So he's not a very popular president. And what this says to me, because this was going back for multiple presidents, this kind of stuff happens. But I worry. I'm worried that there will not be a leader in which a majority of Americans, for the majority of time of their presidency, or any real leader, will actually enjoy their leader and want to follow their lead and want to be on a same type of mission statement as them, be on the same page. I don't know if we're going to see that, and that sucks. But it's not just the Democratic side of the political spectrum. There are a lot of issues on the Republican side as well. And like I said, I'm going to try not to talk about policy or kind of my opinions, my specific opinions on specific candidates like Trump, Nikki Haley, Biden, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., all that kind of stuff, Marianne Williamson, all those people. I'm not going to give my specific thoughts on them per se. But I think we have to talk a little bit about the Republicans. You see, as we have gone further and further throughout the election cycle, with each time that Donald Trump has gotten into more and more legal trouble. I mean, when the mugshot came out of him and all of the people who worked in his administration, and then he immediately turned it into, I believe, some kind of NFT. Basically, he basically turned it into merch. Made a crazy amount of money off that. He's a smart businessman, but it's also crazy that we're at this point in our society. And it's just not good. But as you look at it now, Trump is plus 61.1 over Nikki Haley. They're the only two people left in this race. Trump is going to be the nominee, and it's not even close. You see, Haley, she towards the end, maybe till right here. Where's that? January is when she started to gain a little bit of traction, really dug in, but no, not at all. But let's go to the beginning to see. I believe that's Ron DeSantis right there. Yeah. Ron DeSantis, you can see him go all the way down. But I think that is interesting. Yeah. Look at that. Yeah, DeSantis 19.5, Ramaswamy 4.7. Very interesting stuff right there. Now, moving forward. These are the dates on the calendar to be aware of. Obviously, we just had the South Carolina primary where Donald Trump just won. Today, or yesterday, I guess, was the primary for Michigan. And we're going to have more primaries for more people as well. Caucuses and primaries and all this kind of stuff. So people are going to start making their decision. And then as you see, Guam is having a caucus. Virgin Islands having a very cool. You'll see the Republican convention July 15th through 18th. And then the following month, August 19th through 22nd, you'll have the Democratic convention in Chicago, Illinois. Then you have presidential debates from these two conventions. I think they'll probably make their decision whether it's going to be Biden or, obviously, I would imagine at this point, unless Donald Trump is thrown in prison, he is going to be the nominee. And unless Joe Biden is not fit enough for office or they find somebody else to take over his place and he steps down because of health or whatever, approval ratings are not very good, as we saw earlier. So maybe he will drop out because of the approval ratings, but say it's because he wants to retire and spend time with his family. I'm not sure. Most likely he will be the nominee at this point, though. But definitely not a guarantee like it is Trump on the Republican side. From there, we will be having debates, maybe debates. I wouldn't hold my breath on a Trump-Biden debate. Because I do not think that they want to have a debate between Trump and Biden because I believe people on the Democratic side would be a little worried about the performance of Biden in a debate against Trump, but maybe I could be wrong. Maybe they'll actually have him debate Trump, which I think would be interesting. To see him in a one-on-one talking to Trump for say like an hour or something like that, hour and a half or so. Um, no aides there to help him or anything. Maybe he has people talking in his ear, but there's nobody else to hand him a document and be like, no, you're supposed to be doing this or this. Give him some time to prep for a debate and have a conversation with Donald Trump. I think that'd be interesting. Really like to see that. Then November 5th is the presidential election. And then 17 is when electors cast their votes. And then from there, we're off to the races. We start getting people sworn in. Very, very, very interesting. You will stay with me for that entire time. We will do our best to look into what is going on in our world and kind of where our society is going to be going. I'm very worried about the future. Unfortunately, it appears like our leaders are not the best and brightest that our society has to offer, and that's unfortunate. I think with the technology that we have thus far on this planet, we're very close. Quantum computing, nuclear fusion, possibly. We're close. We're close to being able to come up with technology that allows us to move throughout our universe to establish colonies elsewhere and to spread out across the galaxy. But unfortunately, there are many different things that us on this planet have to worry about. And I don't think that our leaders are capable enough at this current moment. Maybe there's somebody who is 6 years old right now who in 50 years will be the next president and they'll be amazing. I don't know. But as it stands right now, the leaders that we have guarding not only here in America, but in the entire world are less than desirable. And for my mission of what I want our world to become long after I'm passed away and dead and my kids are dead, right now we don't have those leaders. And that worries me. But if you're listening to this, you could be one of those leaders. You could take action in your local community. You could run for a school board. You could become a teacher. You could become a sports coach. You can make a difference in the life of somebody else. You could volunteer at your church and go to overseas areas and help out those people that are in need of help. Or become a nurse and sacrifice your time and your sleep schedule to volunteer at a shelter of some sort, or to become a surgeon and perform life-saving surgeries on people in the emergency room, or become a biologist and help save dying species that are close to extinction on our planet. There are many different ways to make a difference here on Earth. And I feel like it's more common that regular people, people that are not politicians, not billionaires, not the 1% of people, not superstar athletes, not movie stars, but just regular people, your local teacher, your local nurse. These are the people that can make a real difference on a grand scale. I hope for our future that we have more of those people coming on the way. And that trickles up to our leaders. But I'm not holding my breath, and neither should you. Do not wait for those people around you to become the good people out there. You can start right now. Thank you. This is the Zach Moore Podcast.